Hey, I'm Jake Anderson. This story, it's one I never thought I'd tell, honestly. I don't even like thinking about it. But here I am, so yeah. I guess if you're listening, you'll understand why prom night isn't some lighthearted memory for me. It's the night that everything changed. This happened last spring. I was a senior at Harding High, just a regular high school in a small town, the kind where you can walk from one end to the other in about 15 minutes. Anyway, prom was coming up and everyone was hyped. I had my suit picked out, the perfect tie, even some half-decent dance moves ready. But the real highlight was that I'd asked out Becca Clark. You know, the girl who everyone's kinda in awe of. Somehow she'd said yes. I'll never forget how that night started. We took pictures at her place. Her parents insisted on getting about 1,000 shots of us standing in front of their old maple tree. I was trying to act cool, but I'll admit, I was nervous. After that, we met up with our friends, Luke and Amber, and headed to the school gym, which had been decked out like some fairy tale ballroom. Everything felt normal, perfect even. We danced, joked around, took selfies with everyone we knew. Around 10, I went outside to get some air, and that's when Luke came out, looking worried. "Hey, have you seen Becca?" he asked. I shook my head. "She was with Amber just a minute ago," I told him. He frowned. "Amber just came looking for you. She thought you were with Becca. Now our school's gym isn't that big. People go to the bathroom, grab drinks, but they don't just vanish." Luke and I looked at each other, both feeling that sudden, strange tension. We decided to check outside. It was cold, the air damp and a little foggy. I called her name, walked around the side of the building, checked all the usual spots where students sneak off to. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Becca. Just one line. "Help me." No explanation, no follow-up, just "help me." My stomach dropped. I showed it to Luke and we both stood there, frozen. I mean, it's Becca. She doesn't play games like that, you know? She's smart, she's funny. She wouldn't mess around with something like that. Luke said, "Try calling her." So I did. It rang once, twice, and then it clicked. But she didn't say anything. Instead, I heard this faint static-like noise, like she was somewhere windy or... I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it wasn't normal. I kept saying her name, trying to get her to respond, but there was just silence on the other end. And then the line went dead. Luke's face went pale, and I could tell he was just as freaked out as I was. "Maybe it's a prank," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "No way," I said, shaking my head. Becca wasn't that kind of person. We went back inside, trying to keep cool, but it was impossible not to feel that rising panic. I found Amber and asked her when she'd last seen Becca. She said they'd gone to the restroom together, but Becca had left before she did. That was the last time anyone saw her. By now I was texting her over and over. "Becca, where are you? Are you okay?" I even tried calling her again, but nothing. Just straight to voicemail. That's when Luke got an idea. "What if we track her phone?" he said. He was always the tech guy in our group, the one who knew all the tricks. I didn't even hesitate. He pulled out his phone, opened some app, and after a minute he had a location, but it wasn't anywhere near the school. Jake," he said, looking at me, his face tense. Her phone's pinging from Walker's Woods." Now, Walker's Woods is this stretch of trees just outside town. It's the kind of place people used to go to dare each other to explore when we were younger. There were all these stories about the woods, about things people had seen out there at night. I hadn't thought about those stories in years, but as soon as he said it, I felt that chill run through me. But I had to find her. So we got into my car, drove out to the woods. I remember every second of that drive. The roads were dark, barely lit, and it felt like the whole world was just empty. Luke kept checking his phone, making sure we were heading in the right direction, and eventually we pulled up near the entrance to the woods. The second we got out of the car, I felt this heavy silence settle over us. It wasn't like being outside at night. It was like, I don't know, like the whole world had gone quiet. Luke led the way, his flashlight barely cutting through the thick trees, the shadows twisting around us. And then we saw it, her phone, lying there on the ground right in the middle of a clearing. I picked it up, my hand shaking. The screen was cracked, smeared with dirt, but it was definitely hers. I turned it on, hoping for some kind of clue, but the battery was dead. "Becca!" I yelled, my voice echoing through the trees. No response. We kept searching, calling her name, pushing further into the woods. Luke was getting nervous, muttering about heading back, but I couldn't leave without her. I mean, she was out here somewhere. I knew it. After what felt like hours, we finally reached this old, crumbling structure, half hidden by the trees. It looked like an abandoned cabin or something, barely standing with the roof half caved in. And that's when I saw her. Becca was sitting on the ground, her back against the wall, her face pale, her eyes wide. She looked up when she saw us, but she didn't say anything. She just stared, like she wasn't sure if we were real. I ran over, kneeling beside her, checking her for any injuries, but she didn't seem hurt, just shaken. Finally, I asked, "Becca, what happened? Why did you come out here?" She looked at me, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Jake. I don't know how I got here. I was in the restroom and then, I don't know." She trailed off, her hands shaking, her eyes darting around like she was expecting something to jump out at her. Luke and I exchanged a look, both of us feeling that same eerie sense that something wasn't right. We helped her up, started guiding her back to the car, trying to keep calm, but there was this tension in the air, like we weren't alone. As we walked, I kept hearing these faint noises, branches snapping, something rustling just out of sight. I told myself it was just animals, maybe even the wind, but deep down, I didn't believe it. None of us spoke until we reached the car. We finally got her back to town, dropped her off at her house, and she barely said a word. I still don't know how she ended up out there, why she texted me like that. She swears she doesn't remember, that everything after she left the restroom is just blank. Since then, we haven't really talked about that night. I mean, how do you even explain something like that? But every now and then, I'll get this feeling like someone's watching me. Sometimes I'll look out my window at night and see shadows moving in the trees. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if I'll ever understand it. All I know is I'll never go back to Walker's Woods. And if you're ever near Harding, Illinois, maybe you should avoid them too.